All right, so today we are finishing out our 10 laws. You know, and you think, it feels like we've been on it forever, but there were 10 of them. So, you know, that's almost forever, it seems like. So we're finishing out with Law 10 today, which is the law of exposure. And then next week we'll pick up with the common boundary myths, things that people think, and actually they're all written on the board over there, as to what we'll talk about and how they process. We may not have to spend forever because we've talked about some of that as we've done some of the rest of these particular classes and these different conversations and some of this other stuff. And resistance to boundaries is coming, and then the measuring success. Those really shouldn't take that long, maybe. But you know how it goes. Maybe next year. Who knows? So be thinking about what you might want to study when the boundaries discussion comes up. I've got a couple ideas myself, but if there's anything particular that we want to study, send me an email or a Facebook message or a text or a smoke signal or a carrier pigeon, something. Let me know. Come up to me and say, hey, Andy, don't call me. I don't like talking on the phone. That is boundary, Ray. Okay, so with the law of exposure, I wanted to read you what he has written here about this particular concept. He's got a whole lot written, and I've got a whole lot highlighted, but I just wanted to read this little section right here, right off the top. It says, a boundary, as we've talked about, is a property line. It defines where you begin and where you end. We have been discussing why you need such a line. One reason stands above all others. You do not exist in a vacuum. Excuse me. Yeah, okay, sorry. You exist in relation to God and others. Your boundaries define you in relation to others. The whole concept of boundaries has to do with the fact that we exist in relationships. Therefore, boundaries are really about relationships and finally about love. The law of exposure says that your boundaries need to be made visible to others and communicated to them in relationships. Why do you think it's important to communicate your boundaries?
And if you don't, you won't know. Or that other people won't know.
So that somebody can't say, I didn't know.
I didn't know. They got to know it, right? What people shouldn't just be able to read your mind? You ever heard that? Well, they should have just known.
It's common sense.
You should have known better.
Common sense.
That's common sense.
You
Right.
weren't raised in a barn.
You should know what to do, right? Generally, that's general principle. See, shut the door. My biggest thing right now, it's 100,000 degrees outside. Daniel opens the door and just strolls out. Leaves the door open. Shut the door! It's like I've got this ridiculous dad sense that I know that the door is open. Any other dads got that sense? You're like, somebody left the door open.
No, but I hear it every day.
Right? It's like you leave a light on, right? Who left lights on in the house, right? You're not even home, right? But you have to. Uh-oh. Right? So we have to expose people, as this is the law of exposure. We have to make sure that we tell people about our boundaries. We have to let people know that, right? Because we go back to that big old concept of assuming. We just assume somebody should know, right? How many of you have been married more than 5 years? Right? All right. No, we're not multiplying that, right? But, all right, we're 28. 29 this year? In August, right? 29 this year in August?
We're just getting started.
And so, when you look at that, you think, how many of you, don't raise your hand at this one, because you're just going to get in trouble. All right? How many of you think after all these years together, they should just know?
I do.
You're not supposed to raise your hand. All right, go ahead.
I'm
Comments?
going to raise my hand for Maria.
Well, we've been married so long, you should just know.
15 years and still.
About to go with just toddlers in the world of marriage.
You should just know. Don't they know me better than that, right? That they should know how I feel. They should know what I want. They should know how I feel. You know why that's a failure of a thought in relationships, that they should just know?
Well, that person does change over time.
Exactly. Anybody changed over the life of their marriage?
I spent 15 years finally figuring something out, and then it says, I don't need that. So, no, they shouldn't just know.
Anybody else dealt with that one? Sherry, raise your hand. Right? Because all of a sudden, They think, oh, I'm finally going to fulfill this need or this want or this desire or this feeling of their partner, and then their partner does what?
Changes it.
Changes it. Oh, what's the word? Changed. Anybody ever heard that?
Yes.
Anybody ever been the person that it was changed up and they did the change, right?
I remember the day I heard it from my 6-year-old daughter. Daddy, I changed my mind.
Yeah. She was younger than that, though.
I've changed. Anybody ever heard that one? I don't think that's a childhood thing. I think that's, I've changed my mind. And it's like they do it on purpose. Right? You start to figure them out and then they do what? They change it. I think they do it on purpose. I think women do that on purpose just to annoy me. Right? But I think that is something that people change. Right? Your boundaries need to be made visible to others and communicated. It's not enough to just make it visible. I guess, obvious disdain on your face or a body language or something like that may be what you're doing to make it visible. But you also got to do what? Tell me. What'd you say?
Communicate.
Communicate it to them. It doesn't matter what the relationship is. We have to make sure that we are, number one, making our boundary visible, but we're also not just being body language, even though 80 to 85% of what we communicate in any given situation is through body language of some sort, we still have to be willing to communicate it. Now, how many different ways can you communicate something to somebody? Not by phone.
You got visual, said, olfactory, smell.
You're talking about all the body senses.
Yeah.
Well, body language is one of them, right? We can communicate through body language. That may be the way that we're communicating it is a visible sense that... Have you ever done that? Shy away, pull away. Somebody that makes you uncomfortable comes up and puts their hands on your shoulder. Ladies, how many of you? Annoying sibling comes up and grabs you. What do?
Punch him in the face.
That's communication. It's a physical communication, but it is communication. There's a boundary. Don't touch me. And I'm going to help you learn not to touch me. All right? But here's what happens. A lot of the times we are uncomfortable. Remember when we talked about a couple of sessions back, we talked about all the different ways that maybe we're uncomfortable with communicating boundaries or we're uncomfortable. Why we don't want to do that, right? Because we're afraid of what? Rejection, right? We are beset by fears of guilt, not being liked, loss of love, loss of connection, loss of approval, receiving anger, being known, and so on. How many of you don't communicate things because you don't really want people to understand you or know you? If they know me, they can what?
Not long.
Say again?
They won't like.
They can use it against you.
Well, they might not like what they see. They can use it against you. They can hurt me with it. If I am too open, if I am too vulnerable, if I am too willing to let people into my innermost boundaried self, that gives them what? Possible what over me? Leverage. Good word for it. Power. We're afraid to possibly give somebody else power over us. You know how powerful that is in the concept of trust? If you get hurt by somebody, you no longer what? Trust them. Right? And in order to trust them, you have to be willing to do what?
Be vulnerable.
Be vulnerable. Being vulnerable means that you are willing to let that person in, to let that person know you, and to possibly let that person hurt you again. So you have to be vulnerable to them. You have to be willing to let them hurt you. So here's what we do. While we're not necessarily visible with it, we don't necessarily communicate it to them in the relationship, we do this thing that he calls secret boundaries. Right? Because of these fears, we try to have secret boundaries. We withdraw passively and quietly. We secretly resent instead of telling someone that we are angry about how they hurt us. We privately endure the pain of someone's irresponsibility instead of telling them how their behavior affects us and other loved ones, information that could be helpful to their soul. If we don't tell them, they don't know, they can't do what? Anybody ever talk to somebody and they complain about somebody? You know what I do for a living, right? And people will talk and they will say and they will engage and they'll say, I've dealt with this, I've dealt with this, I've dealt with this. One of the questions I ask, have you ever told them? Oh, I couldn't possibly do that. What do you think the reasons are people say they couldn't possibly do that?
They're not gonna listen anyway. It's not gonna make them do it.
Not going to make a difference. They're not going to listen. That's a guy response, by the way. If I have 10 guys, 9 of them will say that.
Really, why say something if you know it's not gonna make a difference?
Why bring it up? It's not going to change anything. Hey, what's wrong with you? Nothing. What do you mean? You obviously there's something wrong. Well, it just doesn't make a difference anyway, so why even... Why talk about it? Why bring it up? Why start an argument over something that's not going to change anyway? Anybody ever felt that? Anybody ever heard that?
She has.
Right?
You've also got that other one where they say, I shouldn't have to tell.
That's the assumption part, isn't it?
Yeah.
I shouldn't have to tell you that... Whatever.
Yeah, they should know, right? Everybody knows that's you know.
Everybody knows you don't do that. So we do what? We set secret boundaries. We withdraw passively and quietly. Instead of engaging it, instead of dealing with it, instead of communicating our struggle or our problem or our issue or whatever it happens to be, we just slowly kind of step out of whatever it is. You stop going to a club. You stop attending committee meetings. You stop going to church.
I call it building a wall.
We're building a wall.
Every time you get hurt, you lay a brick, so you build a wall of protection, not to let people in so you don't get hurt.
Well, eventually we end up like walls around Troy, right? They were 60 foot thick and 100 foot high. I don't know how they knew how high they were. I think there was a description in some kind of writing somewhere, probably the Iliad. But they were arguably impenetrable. And that's how we become. Don't raise your hand. How many have got walls? How many have pretty thick, menacing, non-transversible walls? Right? Did you do that noisily? Or did it brick by brick, without anybody realizing it's happening, happen? Right? We secretly resent. We're frustrated with them. They did it again. They did it again. They did it again. Right? We privately endure. We just don't talk about it. Well, that's my
Cross the bear.
cross to bear. Well, I made that decision, so I have to... Have you ever heard the term live with it? Well, I'm stuck with you. I got to find a way to live through it. Anybody ever said that?
What's wrong with that, though? You made a decision.
Well, that's the commitment concept, right? So when you go back to the concept of marriage, right, if we're talking about that, you make a commitment or a covenant, right, with God to love, honor, sickness, health, richer, poorer, better, or worse, till what? Death. Do you know okay, I'm going to ask this. I'm sure I've asked it in here. You all know what the goal of marriage is?
Stay married till you die.
To stay married till one of you die. And you know what? God doesn't tell you how you get there. All right? So I don't know if you help him along with that path. Hey, I'm going to help you find Jesus, right? Right? But that's the goal, right? Our goal is to stay married to fulfill my commitment. If that's the case, you have to learn to manage your relationship, which is an ugly word and a boring word, because you live most of your marriage in the mediocre anyway, right? Sometimes there are periods within a relationship, any given relationship, but especially marriage, where it's just surviving. But you made a what? You made a commitment, you made a promise that you were going to do this till death. And so you got to find a way to it. I've always wondered why we're always sicker and always poorer and it's always worse. Can I get a good day? Right? But it's, you know what? You have, number one, you have to learn how to recognize those good days. Some of that is this. Exposure. But you have to be willing to communicate what's bothering you, what's going on, how you feel about something, and hopefully the other person will be what? Open and receptive. Did I spell that right?
Yep.
Receptive. Open and receptive to what you have to say. Now, listen, you can't every single day have some ridiculous problem. It can't always be about your boundaries. You also have to be what to whose? To theirs. Yes, open and receptive to theirs, right? Sometimes we have to privately endure because that's what we have what? Agreed to do. How easy is it to raise children? Close your ears to me. Right? Liar. Right? Raising children is hard. Have you ever felt like you are enduring your children? I'm never going to get to the bottom of children. It's just I know people, my brother, his kids are growing up out of the house. I'm never going to get rid of kids because then there's going to be what? Grandkids, right?
So if each one of you have 3 of the 24 dollars.
Well, if I could get more than one of them to have one, that'd be awesome, right? But we have to learn to privately endure that. We don't learn to privately endure it. That's what we do. Instead of speaking up, we just said, well, I made a commitment, so I have to learn how to get through it. But it doesn't matter what I say or what I do. It's not going to change anything. So, don't worry about it. This one right here, he uses specifically give in over and over. He uses that in the concept of children. Right? Anybody know that parent that just gives in and 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 gives in some more, and then when they're done, they give in some more after that? How's that child turn out? What? Spoiled. Work in the courts. How many of those have you seen? Right? You know how many I see? How many parents? Listen, you've got to set a boundary. You've got to tell them no. I'm talking to people who have children in their 30s or more. The parent still can't say no to that child. Well, I've never said no to them. I don't know what they're going to do. I'd say, well, you are a bad person. Because you should have done this. Way back, I don't tell people they're bad people. But, right? It is not helpful. We said this way back at the beginning of the boundaries conversation. It is not helpful to constantly give in. Right? We have a thing within marriage at these days or relationships where the woman wants to be treated like a what? No. What? Who? A queen. They want to be treated like a queen. You know what they're referring to? They're referring way back when the queen didn't even have to walk. In fact, they would wrap the young princess's feet in rags so that their feet would not grow. So they literally were not able to walk. They had to be what? Carried. And it's not just carried. They were on a throne. It had all these people wrapped around it carrying this little girl wherever she wanted to go. Then the queen was exactly the same way. And every wish and desire that they wanted was handed to them on a silver platter.
Sounds like we've kind of gone back to those days with a lot of...
They're trying to, aren't they? Oh, they need to treat me like a queen.
Be queens.
Huh?
I just said sometimes the men want to be the queens.
Oh, they want... Well, okay, we'll flip that around. What do some men want? Of course, none of you.
The king of the hill.
What?
The king of the hill.
King of the hill. I am the king of my... And you will do...
Exactly what I said.
That's exactly right. You will submit like a good Christian wife should.
That's scripture.
We're all going to line up
All right.
to beat Jason out of class.
Wait. Wait.
We've known him since.
Right. All right.
I can find scripture for that.
All right. Submission. Right. Now, this may be our next top. Marriage may be our next topic down the path. But submission is biblical, but not in the way the joke is meant. That's just not what it means. It doesn't mean you do whatever I tell you to do. No, the concept of submission is that you are leading her in such a way that she wants to do nothing more than to submit to your guidance, because you are guiding her in what way? If we're not doing that, men, we don't deserve her submission.
But that submission is reciprocal.
Oh, the concept is it's a little bit different for the men. What's the argument for the men?
The men has to love their wives as Christ loved the church.
What did Christ do for the church?
Christ loved the church.
So it is starts with an S, ends with an sacrificial. It's a sacrificial love. That means we are sacrificial for our spouse, for our woman. That's how we are willing to take care of them. That's why when the boat is sinking, who gets on the boats?
Women and children.
Women and children first. The men are willing to sacrifice themselves so the women and children can get out. Why is it that we protect the women? Why is it the military is noting in their studies that when they have women and men in the same units and they go into a conflict situation, the men end up doing what?
Protecting the women.
Protecting the women. They're saying that is becoming a problem within that concept. That the men, it is so inherently built into a guy to protect his woman that he will protect any woman. How many of you would step in front of harm for a woman you don't know?
That's how we met, was at a holdup at a convenience market. I mean,
There you go.
and the guy came in.
What do I do with that?
A sawed-off shotgun, and he throws me on the floor.
Mhm.
He's got the gun on Kevin. Kevin's emptying the till, and then the guy's fixing to leave. So Kevin, he doesn't lay down on top of me, but he kind of lays down near me.
Mhm.
You know.
She didn't tell you she had her nursing white.
Yeah, that's back when we wore white uniforms, so I had my nurse's whites on, and so I mean.
Guys, you can find your next woman protecting them getting robbed. You got to get rid of the first one first. That's we don't quite know how we get here. All right? So that's a whole, please
Well, I
do.
mean, that's really true, and I thought, here we went through this trauma together, and I just instinctively knew
Mhm.
that he was going to take the first bullet, unless of course the guy leaned over with the shotgun and shot us both.
Mhm.
But I just kind of assumed he would take the first bullet.
So is your relationship built on trauma bonding? There's a whole nother conversation. Isn't
Isn't
that a great story, by the way? Which illustrates perfectly, right, that men, if we are sacrificial the way we're supposed to be sacrificial, it should lead our spouse. Now, let's be argumentative. In a culture like today's where it's trying to teach everybody that everybody's equal or some are above others, that makes that sacrificial submission thing a little bit difficult.
The wife has to be in such a way that the men want to die.
Well, she has to be receptive to it. Now, here's an interesting thing. That is not an if.
Somebody to protect
Wait.
him.
That is not an if-then statement in the Bible. Do you know what I mean by that? When you're writing computer language, if-thens are a big thing. Why? If this is your variable, then this occurs. Right? If this, then that. It is not, if your husband is this way, then you will be submissive to him. It's not, if she's submissive to you, then you will be sacrificial to her. It's not a suggestion, nor is it an option. You can't say, well, he's not doing his part, so I'm not doing my part. But all of this, to wrap back to where we are in this concept of exposure, is how do you know where you are if you don't communicate it, if you don't talk about it, if you don't engage that person, if you don't share what you're struggling with and what you will and will not accept? You know what there is, even in a marriage, things you will not be willing to accept from who? Your spouse, your friend, a parent, a child, a coworker, a boss, whatever it is. There are things that you are not willing to accept.
Less than a year into our,
What would you say?
less than a year into our marriage, her uncle,
Oh, Kevin, don't go on Uncle Brady.
he was gonna light up in the house, and I said, no, you gotta go outside. And you would have thought I had questioned his parentage 5 generations back.
Because we asked him not to smoke in our house.
Don't smoke in the house. Don't go to their house, smoke. They'll throw you out. All right, so the last one on this list is they also secretly comply, which I think is an interesting. You secretly comply, but you complain or gripe about or whatever it happens to be. So his scriptures that go along with Ephesians 4:25 and 26, Ephesians 5:13 and 14. Write them down, look them up later. Here's what happens. If not openly communicated, they will be indirectly or through manipulation. So what's that saying is if you don't openly communicate your boundaries with somebody, you will communicate them indirectly and probably at that point and through manipulation in the way that you engage with that person. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. You stop fulfilling this part. You stop fulfilling that. In marriages, you see people stopping behaviors, either in the bedroom, care of the house, working, childcare, whatever it happens to be. They will stop doing what they will consider to be their part. In friendships, it'll be the same way. In work situations, it'll be the same way. So we have to make sure that as we come to the end of this particular conversation of laws, the law of exposure, your boundaries need to be made visible to others and communicated to them. Listen, I'm not going to accept that. Jeremy, you cannot wear that shirt in this class ever again. Right? We have to communicate it. All right, thank you all very much. Next week, we will pick up with common boundary myths. We'll burn through those probably pretty quickly. I'm hoping to do two a class just because we've talked about a lot of them already as we went through class, but I do want to go through it. And then, what month is it? Almost August? Tomorrow? Tuesday? Tuesday's August. Hopefully by the end of September, we'll be done with this and into a new topic. Thank you all. Have a great day. Go downstairs, get yourself some food. Don't get sick.